Welcome to Little Conversations Today. We are very excited to present Well, Jeff, for starters, we really want to thank you for being here. It's an absolute pleasure, and we're really looking forward to hearing all of your insights as to how we can develop and grow as human beings. So thank you very much for being here.
Well, it's my pleasure, Dan, and thank you again for having me on Little Conversations today.
No problem. Jeff, what we first wanted to ask was, if you were to give us some key elements, some key techniques that we can use in goal setting and achieving to help us improve, what would they be? And where would we start, and how would we go through the processes?
Well, goal setting is crucial, whether it's personal goals in your life or whether it's goals in your business. If you are a sales staff, a sales team, and a sales manager, goal setting is absolutely imperative to your success. If you're not setting goals, for yourself on a daily basis and monthly basis, then you're really doing yourself and your business a disservice. When I talk to clients about goal setting, one of the first things I ask them is really, what are your aspirations in life? Where do you want to be? Some people, Dan, are actually quite comfortable in the modest two-bedroom home. As long as they can pay for the education for their children and send them off to school and really help get their kids off to a good start. Other people, on the other hand, they really they'll say to me, I want the 5-bedroom huge luxury home on oceanfront property. And when that's the case, then once you really decided what your aspirations are, that's when you can actually set goals that will get you there. Without knowing what your aspirations are, it's really hard to set the goals. And when it's time to start setting goals, you have to do it in stages. One of the first things that you have to be able to do is identify, what your long-term goal is. Where do I want to be? And when I say a long-term goal, I mean, a 3-year plan and a 5-year plan. Where do you want to be in 3 and 5 years? And then once you've got the long-term goal, that's when you can start setting, mid-term goals and short-term goals to really make sure that you get there. And when you start setting them, you might run into a situation where you say to yourself, I don't think these short-term goals are going to actually get me there. Short-term goals are a lot easier to adjust than long-term goals. So I really advise people to start with the long-term and then kind of work their way in. I actually set goals, Dan, on a day-to-day basis, and in some cases, I'm setting goals on an hourly basis. I will sit down and I'll say, okay, what do I want to accomplish in the next hour? And I will set a plan in place that's going to make sure that I accomplish that goal. The other great thing about setting short-term goals is you really have an opportunity to see whether you've been successful and to get a little more of what I like to refer to as instant gratification. If I set a goal that is an hour from now, and say, in the next hour, I want to accomplish this. At the end of that hour, I can pat myself on the back. I can say, good job, Jeff. You've done it. You've reached that goal. And so that's why it's really important to set short-term goals and mid-term goals and long-term goals. The other thing is when it comes to goals is you must make sure that the goals hit a few different categories. The one category is clear for you. It has to be something that you understand and other people would be able to understand. You can't make complicated goals. They have to be very, very clear. Next thing they have to be is they have to be measurable. Meaning you have to be able to look at something at any point along the stage and say, am I on track to reach this goal? And when you can do that and say, okay, maybe I'm not quite on track. Maybe I need to adjust some of my short-term goals to be able to get me back on track to reach my mid or my long-term goals. And the other thing it has to be is reasonable. It has to be something that is realistic. It's interesting. I was talking to a client the other day, and it just kind of popped up in my mind. One of my favorite comedians of all time. I'm sure you're familiar with Steve Martin. He once said that one of his goals was to be the all-being master of time, space, and dimension. Now, I'm pretty sure the all-being master of time, space, and dimension is neither clear, measurable, or realistic. That type of goal in that essence is going to fail. The fourth thing that I ask clients to do when they're setting goals is to visualize their goal. Right? If your goal is to have that 5-bedroom luxury home on oceanfront property, I say find a picture of a 5-bedroom home on oceanfront property. You want to have a pool, find a picture of a pool. You want to have a boat, find a picture of a boat. And take that picture and introduce it to as many areas of your life as you possibly can. All right? Meaning that you're going to put the picture of your 5-bedroom home in your office where it is clearly visible, so that every day when you sit down and you're doing your work, you can look at that and say, you know what, that's my goal. You can visualize it, you can see it. And I don't just talk about visualizing in the sense of getting a picture. I also mean see yourself in that home. Know that that is where you're going. And when you can see yourself in it, what will happen is you will find the path that will get you there. And I always tell clients, you really have to visualize what you want, and just not think that may be where you're going, but just know that that's where you're headed. And when you do that, you'll have a much better chance of reaching your goal.
Now, would you do you give them the advice of the lights on a car when you're coming down a dark road, and you only need to see to a certain point? Then at that point, then you'll see further. Then at that point, then you'll see further. Analogy?
Yeah. Do you mind if I use that in my next meeting?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. That's a great one. I've heard it from Bob Proctor. I've heard it from Jack Canfield. It's a lot of people say it, and it's true because it's a great analogy when we're talking about goals and achieving them. Is that, you know what, if you want this, but you're here, it is true that, you know what, you sometimes can't see the end result. But if you operate under the premise of driving a car and you see where your headlights are, and when you get to that point, you automatically see further. And it's a great analogy, and anybody that's goal setting should be looking at that specific way of operating from a goal setting perspective. Would you not agree?
I do agree. It actually is a very great analogy. And one of the things that you have to be prepared is that your goals will change when you reach that point where you couldn't see any further. Do not be surprised if all of a sudden you're saying to yourself, hey, I can do more than this, and your long-term goals may change. The other thing that might happen is when you get to that point, you may realize that maybe you overshot a little bit, and maybe where you were headed is maybe a little bit less realistic than you thought that it might be. So you'll adjust your short-term goals, to compensate for that. Absolutely. I actually heard it in a little bit of a different angle or a different reference, and that is that when you're sitting and you're watching a television in a room, you can see just as far as the TV. But when you stand up and you start to actually approach the TV, you can actually see what's behind the TV and what's going on, further down the road. So I actually prefer the headlights, and I'm going to take you up on that and use it the next time I come.
Not a problem. It's not mine, so you could use it anytime you want.
Well, I have to say that you make sure that you quote the person, you give them credit for it the first time, and then after that it becomes yours. So you've given Bob Proctor his due credit from this point forward. You can take that and use it on your own.
Yep, and it's funny because they also talk about. Bob's also said, which is very key when you're looking at establishing things that you have to do to achieve your goals. Sometimes they're so minimal and the result is astronomical. And he uses it as, say you're in Florida in the United States and you're looking to get to Vancouver, British Columbia. And he says, and you got this direct path. He says, if you move that steering wheel 1/4 of an inch, you're going to end up in a completely different spot. And same thing with goal setting. So that's very key to keep in mind too, is it's just slight changes in our attitude, maybe our demeanor, maybe our daily actions that can make a huge difference in anything we do.
Dan, the last thing I want to mention about goals is a great book that I read, several years back was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And in there, he talks about the importance of setting what he calls unselfish goals. Okay, and when we talk about unselfish goals, these are things that are going to be for the betterment of others, of others, and depending on how really grandiose you want to make it, they can be for the betterment of a company. They can be if you can start off by being for the betterment of an individual, it can go to the betterment of a company. From there, it can go to the betterment of an industry or a community. And even so much to the point where you really want to make a difference. I want to do something that's going to make make a difference in the betterment of mankind. And when you set unselfish goals, what ends up happening is, through the law of attraction, you end up attracting, more positive energy towards you. When you're doing good things for other people, the universe starts doing great things for you. And by setting unselfish goals, along with, and I'm not going to call them selfish goals, but, the goals for your own personal and corporate growth, unselfish goals are a key part of it. So I do things like, I volunteer my time for the Red Cross, doing first aid for young kids on the football field on Sunday mornings, every fall. And I also, I'm still teaching first aid because, one of the things that I want to do is I want to make a positive difference in the community by, teaching people how to help others, through the first aid process. And even so much, on a day-to-day basis, my unselfish goal is I'm going to make everyone I come in contact with every single day have a smile on their face. When they're done with me, I'm going to leave them feeling better about themselves and better about their day than they did before I showed up. And these unselfish goals, in many cases, they're very rewarding and they make me feel really good at the end of the day.